For anybody who didn't fill out the site survey, I have a 15 or 20 answers here. I'll pass those through. We really like to get them back. We tally them off and try to make an evaluation of how exactly will impact the students and how to change it for the better. I have quite a few announcements actually. This event is happening, that's still here, announced last week. Indonesia's killing the fields, the invasion of East Timor, and the United States complicity in genocide. This is an event that's happening, a lecture and a film, presented by Sonoma State student Sunil Sharma, political activist with the East Timor Action Network. It's Thursday, this coming Thursday, May 20th, from 5 to 7 p.m. in Darwin Hall, room 108. And admission is free. So we do have some to pass out to, for those of you who didn't get one off. There's one genocide which has not been highlighted in our media at all, and which a lot of us don't know too much about yet, although it's one of the ones we're going to have to learn about if we spend this deal with comparative genocide. We have more of Dr. Steiner's text for anybody who couldn't afford it before. This is an excellent account of the Holocaust, written by someone who's had the actual opportunity to read. It's $7. So if anybody else has any money here at the end of the semester, buy this book. I have an assortment of handouts that have been passed out during the semester. Not everything is passed out, but a number of resources. I encourage you after the class to come up and find anything that you haven't gotten yet that you would be interested in. There's an excellent magazine called Teaching Tolerance, which I recommend at the end of the class that I teach. There's one postcard left for someone who might be interested in it, or you can just take the address down. And it's free of cost to anyone who look up issues or who might teach it as a part of the programs that they're involved in. It's really good. It has a lot of curricular aids on Holocaust. It has a lot of teachers that write about how they approach this subject, either in junior high classes, high school classes, community classes, or wherever. It has reviews of different drama events that happen around the country that have to do with racism, anti-Semitism, cultural diversity, and other issues that are related to the Holocaust and genocide and human rights. So if anybody's interested in that, I've had that up here. It's probably worth $20 or $25 a year as a foundation that provides it free of cost because they believe very strongly. It's from the South, and originally came out of one of these Black civil rights movements, and they still are working on all the similar important issues. So today we have a discussion, and the group of faculty here will talk about the meaning of the Holocaust and what it is corresponds with, and hopefully you have some questions and comments that you'd like to make, because we'd like to hear from you now. Yeah, papers are back for sociology and for women's studies. So if you want your paper back, you have those. Dr. Yarber, did you have any papers on you? You might have already passed it back. Yeah, they're all out. Okay.
Maybe I should start warming you up. So just to think in terms of how we can best utilize the time and get most out of it. Now, there are very many unanswered questions which I'm sure have accumulated throughout the semester. So that's the time to ask questions which you may not have had a chance to have asked before. That's one thing. And the other thing is just simply, if you stimulate us, we can stimulate you in terms of what we are going to talk about. And perhaps I'd like to make one thought, which perhaps is best expressed in one very simple sentence. Knowledge without humanity is only information, nothing else. Knowledge without humanity is only information. And that's not good enough. knowledge needs to be applied, otherwise it remains academic and it's not going to bring about any social change. And we need social change. Because the way we are going is not exactly exceedingly constructive, as you may have learned throughout the semester. And we have learned very much, so that is to say we need to discover the meaning of the Holocaust. Because if we don't discover it, we don't make some head along these lines, we have learned exactly nothing. And if we pursue that, if we continue on that path, we are going to be in a worse situation than those people who are survivors. So what we need to be and aim at is to become rescuers, liberators, and not bystanders. All right, that is just about, in a nutshell, what I'd like to share with you before we just continue some sort of a answer, that is to say, question and answer period. Right.
Would like to give us an idea to deliver this lecture. What do you think is important for us to do?
She asked me to say something since I wasn't here for my lecture. I don't know, I wouldn't want to repeat, the whole lecture. Maybe just make this kind of suggestion that I suppose if I could put if I would put my lecture into one sentence, it is that the presence of strange or someone who is different from ourselves is always something is always something very difficult. We always like to be among our own people who feel like us, who speak the same accents as we have, the same language as we do, the same values as we do, because then we just want to go nicely asleep. So that is a kind of pleasant kind of like sitting or swimming in warm water, That is something that we in a sense strive for. We have to be very careful in our own life that there's a kind of seduction of submerging oneself into a group. And so we see today, what I would see as a dangerous trend is this fragmentation of our population into diverse groups where people just simply will submerge themselves into people who are just like us and turn against everybody else. Then eventually we get the outcome that we see now in Yugoslavia. But in a sense we must also see the whole of that sign. It was under that sign the great attraction, the great appeal of National Socialism in Germany was precisely this kind of offer of the politicians. If you follow me, then just lay back and just be like your own. And you don't have to bother with those damn foreigners, you see? You don't have to deal with anybody who's different. In that sense, I think we all can, we see that the whole Holocaust takes on a human dimension. It's not simply something that is limited to National Socialism in Germany, but it is also something that assails us here and that we have to work with as present day inhabitants of this place. So the great threat is not to look around for nasty, the threat is to look around for this seduction of subversion into the group of those symbolists and to say resolutely no to that proposition, because it is That's how I, encapsulate my speech.
I'd like to just share some reflections because I've an internship for the Satisfies where I worked with Dr. Steiner and Carol. And just something that I found very interesting is that at the same time I have heard and read many people responding to the meaning that they have found and hearing claims of, I'll never let this happen again. I have witnessed racist and prejudiced comments while this class has been taking place. And I've heard a lot of people, as we all have at the end of this, say, what does this have to do with the Holocaust? And I think that I would hope that the most important thing for everybody to come away with this is an understanding that this is about human behavior. And that means that it involves everyone. And to also hope that this isn't just a class. This was an opportunity to be introduced for some and to continue for others. And that you take that, maybe not continue with Holocaust class and genocide and things like that, but to share this with you and to look for things in the world that can raise your awareness and be sensitive to your own behavior. Because people have become so sensitive to others' behavior through this class, I've noticed, but they don't quite see the connection with themselves yet. So I would hope that this has been an introduction from the many perspectives that have been offered, and that everybody can come away with a little more meaning and continue that. So just stand after this afternoon.
Yes, please. Don't make it too long.
I have an announcement. Last week, I attended a program at the German consulate. That's why I wasn't here. And what it was about is that starting in September, there has been an exchange program, a very unique exchange program for teaching by the State of Israel, Germany, and America. 3 groups of teachers are going to spend time in each other's country. The first group leaves in September. And they're going to Germany first, then Israel, then back to America. I believe this is going to be an ongoing program as you students go out into your careers. I just want to make you aware that this has started, and you can always get the information from the German consulate.
Someone in response to Anya's comment, a student working with the Holocaust Center, and also as she watched different student reactions and heartbreak papers and so forth, I wanted to say that in the papers, there are all kinds of comments about how this class has impacted your lives. Psychologically, spiritually, your understanding of history, your understanding of the needs of the political active, and it's very heartening to read these papers. It's not always easy to talk about it in these larger group, and I understand that. And one of the nice things about my small room in the Holocaust class was that we had time, and 12 to 15 people in there, and we were able to have time to discuss some of the issues in a slightly more intimate environment, which makes it easy to disclose your own feelings. I thought I would give just a very brief summary of, I got 70 questionnaires back, and I presume we'll get some more back today, which is about typical for each year in terms of the responses that we get. And I thought I'd give you a little bit of synopsis of what your classmates have commented on. If those of you who remember what the survey asked, what motivates you to attend the Holocaust lecture series? Well, we get a whole range of there. Some people just want 2 minutes, and they're very upfront about it. The majority of the people are interested in the subject, have had some contact with it in the past, and feel that they don't know enough of the details and they don't know enough of how it relates to their particular life or discipline. In terms of the emotions that people have in the lecture series, we list about 15 there, and we give you also the other option if you want to add other feelings or either visceral feelings or intellectual feelings, whatever that can be added. We have indifference, grief, anger, repulsion, ambivalence, guilt, shame, pessimism, futility, sympathy, empathy, loss of faith in humanity, and we should have under gain of faith in humanity, I think, to balance it out, responsibility, and then other. And there's no way to synopsize that because there were so many different reactions, but I will suffice to say that we get almost every reaction, almost every emotion can be a subject, including nausea. People give all kinds of descriptions of what it feels like to take this class. And at some point, it seems like it would be good to actually pick this up so some of you would know what the other classmates are feeling, because you're not talking about it in the class necessarily, but you're getting it in the responses and in the papers. So I do know that there's a very profound impact that this has on you, whether it be voted in a discussion or not, it's debatable. Almost every Dr. Steiner's account was a profound account in terms of being able to know who he was, asking questions, and read several of the stories of his life. Most people felt that they needed to talk this over with someone else. Some people talked with a friend. A lot of people found the best person was someone else they knew that was taking the class at the same time, since you were sharing a lot of the same feelings. Some people shared it with their spouse or relative or another teacher. A lot of people talked to other professors about the class that was going through it. Almost everyone wanted more class time to go into emotional issues. And maybe you can speak to this in a little while. And almost everyone wanted more contact with faculty members, and we will try to address that next year, how we organize the class. The most memorable things that you will take away with you as a result of your experience, this is difficult, and actually that's what I would like to ask you now. If some of you could characterize what's the most memorable thing in this class, or what's the most important thing that you found in taking this class?
One thing which I wanted to say related to the account, that not a single, well, maybe one or two students talked to me during the semester about the account. Most of the people never talked to me about it, which is quite interesting. Because apparently people talk about the account to someone else, but they never come and say, hey, you know, I'd like to know a little bit more or go into specifics, but no one has done it actually. Well, I should say no one, but one or two people have actually come to talk to me about it. And it might be of interest to you that not a single faculty member has talked to me about my account, ever. So that tells us something.
Your memory is short.
No, but I mean, you know.
Maybe he has to say what.
Well, certainly not to say, oh, it was interesting, oh, well, there was quite something. But really, it didn't go much further than that. No, it's just symptomatic, I think, and interesting to know, you know, because I'm still alive for reasons which escape me. But I still am very much in a position to respond to stimulating questions, and if they are not stimulating, I can't respond in a way which will make the questions stimulating or adapt. What?
What was their most memorable?
Yeah. Right. Well, that is something. Yeah. See, the idea of what is most memorable is precisely that not enough questions are being asked while you have a chance. Now you have a chance. So what you may have noticed that we are trying to stimulate this. So we really start asking some questions, because otherwise we'll put you in the doghouse.
New hand went up.
Okay, yeah. Raise the hand. Oh yeah, raise the hand. Of course.
I don't know if necessarily you're asking, but I have two roommates that talk a lot during this. And I remember the beginning, I think twice after leaving us to go back to one of the things was when they showed that movie, that movie had the Nazi opening
Nazi people, these were Germans, not necessarily Nazis.
Well, and I remember going to them a lot and saying, actually, no, and saying, oh, bishops, you should see this, and I didn't know this, and I learned about this, and just mad and talking about it. And then as time went by, I guess just the emotional impact slowed down. And the subject that we were touching got lighter, and we didn't have the same reaction. And she saw me like around 3 weeks ago, and my roommates said, you know, how's your thoughts going? You haven't said much about it. And I say, well, it's going. And it's like I didn't know how to put together actually how I had felt for the last few weeks because it hadn't had the same. And she said, it seems like you saw so many gross things in the beginning, and all of a sudden, it's okay to see it, and it's okay to hear it, and it's okay to, you know, just, and that was right, she was telling me, because I didn't notice that I had stopped talking about it, and all of a sudden it was like, oh, it's my class, and we're going to be doing this today, or we're going to be doing that, and see that really, in fact, I read an article about the recognition, and that's really neat. But just in the sense that how the course is structured, you put a heavy load in the beginning, and that, but then at the end, it's in a way or gradually it goes down, and I don't know if you do that first or not, it's just that, I don't know.
Well, I think we do try to give more facts at the beginning of it. If the facts of the Holocaust at the beginning, and some of them are unavoidable, and some of them can only be presented in a rapid form, and then as we go along, we become more interpretive, we try to explain what happened, and you can intellectualize it more, and you can understand it more, so it doesn't have quite the emotional impact. And then we try to move into the positive aspects, like what we're doing about genocides today, or what we want to do about genocides today, rescuers, the positive action that they took, and how we can follow them as a model. So I think in that isn't going to be discovered towards the end. It could not be. I mean, how could we wouldn't really want to keep that the whole time. We'd all be back, you know, by the end of the semester. So, I mean, that's not sort of the structure of the course. Do you feel that it should be changed? Are you saying that it should be changed, or are you just saying that that's what your experience was?
I was afraid that it should have impacted me more deeper. Because still the subject was very important and being covered was new to me, most of the time when I do it. And I wasn't reacting to it in the same way. I was afraid that I may not keep on reacting. And I was going to be over and it's like, I can come to you. And I never could come to you. I don't know why I didn't come to you. I read your stories and then I was freaking out the whole time. And when I picked it up and I finished it and I talked to someone about it and I said, I'm really, scared of this person. I think just by seeing you was
Well, let me say one thing which is important, and so that we understand each other, because it's a very important subject to discuss. First of all, what we have done to begin with during the lectures, we've just simply introduced you to some of the basic impressions, which is descriptive in nature. Once you have the description, it's not going to really help you to understand, so we need to interpret what we describe. And these two go together, because without them we won't have an understanding. So what we are trying to do during the lecture series, not that we see it, obviously, is to create an impression by showing people who really don't know very much about genocide, Holocaust. So we give them descriptive accounts, for example, the panel of survivors, the movie, the documentary which I have shown to the lecture. So this is something which will stimulate your emotions, your curiosity, and also will tell you the realities. But that is not enough, because if we just see the horror of it, That doesn't make us understand how that model can come about. And we are particularly interested in finding out how things can be prevented. And we cannot prevent anything we don't understand. So the more we understand, not only the more we need to be accountable, but the more we are in control. The less I understand, the less I will be in control of a given situation in which I will find myself. Stumble into a situation. And that perhaps reminds me of something I wanted to make clear to you. And I think I've done that to some extent in my lecture during the beginning of the series. And that is that we all create situations by way of interaction. We interact with each other. And we each other by interacting with each other. And that type of interaction will either satisfy our needs or will frustrate us or cause pain. So if we understand that, that's what we call moral intelligence. If we understand that, we will become more accountable. We will say, hey, I am behaving in a certain way which will affect other people. And we together will create social reality to which we then respond, because reality is something which will affect us. It's not just something here or there outside of us, but it will affect us. And because it will affect us, it will either satisfy our basic needs, psycho-emotional, biogenetic, or it will not. And if it is not going to satisfy them, it will either cause frustration. So there's always two things: the situation in which we find ourselves, and the way we will respond to it. And therefore, the situation is something which we have in control depending how we behave towards each other. And how we look at the situation, to what extent we can understand it. Some people feel it's very funny here. Would you like to make some comments and share that with us? Because it would be, because maybe we are not making the right connection here.
I think I anticipate some of your reaction, your reluctance in asking, because after all, the most battle-hardened veterans that we met at the end of the Second World War did the same thing. They did that because they had seen some things and they were not prepared to cause pain. And I suspect that many of you feel that for us, we living this experience in the retail may be a state that we cannot cope with. That's something we didn't make clear to you. Well, we've been doing this for about 10 years. And even the most sensitive people in the world do get inured to pain if you expose them to it for 10 years. And we live with it now for 40 years or so. So we're all big boys and big girls around here. We can cope with it. And you need not feel that you will cause us excess pain in discussing it. And I think if that's the reason for shunning the approach to any member of the faculty, please don't be afraid.
I'd like to say that throughout this lecture series, it has been an awakening on a lot of levels. And a lot of times I come in here and I take it all in and I have to sort of process it. And I feel like I haven't been face to face. I've dealt attention and understand, and you just don't feel like you're getting it from them, like they're shit, like they really understand it. But it's internalized, and it's staying with us, you know, people I've spoken to in this class. It will stay with us. And I'm going to further my education in this area. I feel like I have a really strong foundation for it, for the rest of what it is to learn about human behavior, about the horrors and the terrible things that we all have to stand up against.
Well, that's very helpful indeed. Do you have any beyond that? Go.
Well, that's what I'm saying. As far as questions go, after I read your account, I wanted to come straight to you and talk to you. And I just felt like at the end of the class, everyone's rushing up to the front, and I just didn't, I just went out, I'll meet up, and, that kind of thing happened to me. And I wish I'd known that you were, going to answer questions, because I didn't really know what you were.
Well, I thought we made that very clear, that we all have office hours and that we are open to discussion, not that all people are available, but I mean, I'm always sitting in my office during my office hours. And some people came and some people not. Very frequently from previous classes, not those who attend the classes this semester.
You're really the only person who said, the speakers who come in, are the only people that I know who've had these experiences. My father has, talked to me about things that happened to him as a kid, about his best friend who's Japanese disappeared one day, and not knowing what happened to him. And that was like my first idea about what happened. And so you were my only sources. I didn't realize my girlfriends here that are Jewish have had these sources all their lives. And to me, it's a mystery. I don't know anything, So I appreciate that you're there for the hours, and I guess because I'm so used to not being able to talk to them about it, just hearing that.
Thanks very much. That was very, very well said, and I appreciate it. Yes.
I just wanted to say that all through my life, I'm Jewish, and through my life, I was made to go to Hebrew school. My grandparents were Orthodox, so it was sort of mandatory for me to go to Hebrew school. And I was always taught about the Holocaust, but I was made to learn about it. And so I was made to watch the videos. I wasn't here today that you showed the video of the graphic one. I wasn't here, but I was always made to watch them and learn about my religion, kind of unwillingly at first. And then when I started learning more about the Holocaust, I realized that in that time, and talking with my grandparents, I lost a lot of relatives that were in the Holocaust. They were in Poland, talking with my grandparents, I realized what a privilege it is to be able to learn about this, and to be able to learn more about what happened to most of my family in Europe, why I don't have a lot of my family left. When I was in high school, we studied the Holocaust during the World War II period for maybe a day, and we were shown film, and that was it. And I remember talking to my teacher saying, well, why won't we teach more about this? Why can't we learn more about this? And he said, well, because it's just one more thing in World War II that we have to learn, and we just don't have that much time. And so I took this class because I wanted to, but it was the first time that I was able to learn about it, the first opportunity I was able to actually want to learn about this subject. And I just really wanted to thank you all for making it available to students.
I think that's again, it's very helpful indeed. And I'd like to respond to that just with one question. You said you were made to these things. Did you resent that?
At first, we were talking the question how the literature is affect your emotional level. Well, I became indifferent to it. It was almost, I watched it, and after 4 years of watching the same videos over and over, and the bodies being pushed into ditches, and after years and years of watching that, I just became indifferent. And this just last Easter break, I went home to Los Angeles and went to the museum down there, the Music Hall Center, and it
feel that you are now awake again after the more sensitive to that subject rather than callous.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'd like to comment a couple of things. First off, I value the resources we have here. All of you are wonderful to be here every week and to serve and to serve something that's very rival. So I thank you all for that. My reading, as I've been analyzing, I've left with a couple of questions. One of the questions that I had to personalize, two things that I felt were overwhelming about it were the people when asked to give oral histories, that so many of them apparently had not told their stories to anyone, or to very few people, and they just feel that they're going to be. I felt that was just a big impression because people get that story inside and all that. And then that they were discounted by being asked, well, I'm storing it all life. And I just, I mean, I think our troops are somehow discounted that they suffer. And then I guess another question, the question that's left for me is, and I answer the question of course, but is how does one person could, how Hitler could, this charismatic character could have the impact that he is, and why did these people give the genocide? I mean, I know that's what this is all about, but that just is so strong. How did that, how did they consider it? What happened?
I think that's a very important question that and also relates to what I talked about, the situation which we all create and the susceptibility which then develops because we interact and produce situations to which then others respond, but we also, of course, respond to them. So what I like to call it, what I call it somehow like the lock and key relationships. So the societal situation which prevails in time and space is the lock. And then comes someone and there are needs, unmet needs, frustrated expectations, political upheaval, feelings of inadequacy and inferiority. And then comes someone and is able to fit himself into this societal lock and triggers responses which will seemingly satisfy the needs of those who make up the members or make up the society. So that there will be this interrelationship, and that person, because he does something to the feelings, and Hitler did something to the feelings, not to the intelligence, actually. The opposite, he really made very down people. He was looking for people who were not intelligent. He did not want to bring up people who were superior in intelligence, because that's what Goebbels called this sort of heightened intelligence, the Jewish intelligence, which is too intellectual. See? So they oppose that. They're not at all interested in very intellectually oriented individuals. So Hitler appealed to emotions and was exceedingly successful, obviously. And because he has satisfied some of the emotional needs, they viewed him as the leader, the Führer, and looked at him as a prophet, as a kind of savior, because they felt better. Of course, that is just like if you take a drug. It's not going to be a solution, obviously. But you feel that particular time for which you are grateful, and if you have this sort of feeling of elation and ecstatic joy, which he created in people, then of course they will respond by putting him on a pedestal, which they did. Just think for a moment the absurdity of raising your hand and greet people, just start doing that, to something crazy. Hi Hitler. They're absolutely crazy. Hi Hitler. It's just something which is, hi, my dog jumps, Things which are really absolutely ridiculous,
absurd, and people did it. I mean, you have to be off your rocker somehow to do these sort of things. He meant it, and he was able to do that, to make people behave in a way which was absurd. And just to talk about Richard Paul's lecture, uncritical, totally uncritical, and comply. And that, of course, was an act of a genius. The man was very exceedingly sophisticated, so many things, although he had minimal formal education. Not much at all. He was certainly intelligent and was a very gifted, except his gifts were used in a way which led to human destructiveness.
It seems easy to explain to people, of course, I mean, don't even know what most of us in class about today. And people will understand it, I don't think, that those people were looking for someone to take care of them. They gave their power to somebody, and by giving it to them, they felt like, by giving it to us, they felt like he was going to take care of it.
That's right.
And by him taking it, he was, in some way, was saying, I'm going to take care of it.
Yeah, that is a very important point which you have just raised, because that's what we call is externalization of the consciousness. So that you don't longer need to behave morally because, say, I've abdicated my individual moral responsibility and handed it over to superior authority. And therefore, I'm no longer accountable. Able to do that. And that's what we call externalization of the consciousness. And conscience, I'm sorry, conscience. Yeah. Externalization of conscience.
I would like to suggest that recent years we have tended to avoid talking about evil. And it's so unpleasant and it's so overwhelmingly unpleasant that we never look it in the eye. And it's particularly unpleasant to think that somebody really could be completely evil in the sense that they plot evil not as an immediate act, but as a long-term, as a progressive, as a chain reaction in essence. And the events of the First World War should have warned us, because if you look at the history of the First World War, levels of double dealing on both sides of the war suggested our faith in the ultimate rescue by good principles had no basis in fact. When the Second World War came around, we had plenty of evidence, and we're reluctant to this day to admit that there are such things as evil men. Now, part of the reason for reluctance is that the moment we say that there are such evil men, you're going to get a bunch of people who will propose that obviously if they're evil men, we will now have a machine by which we will recognize evil men, and we have very sophisticated tests, and even better, we will recognize evil children. So now, if you follow this line of reasoning, you fall into the trap that bit their leg for us. But nevertheless, the fact is there are evil men. And there are people who have to choose good, very bluntly and very unequivocally. There are many, many gray areas and a tremendous number of actions which causes a great deal of agony. But there has to be a point where the anticipation tells us that this is an evil act. We are on the brink of such decisions today. When the Japanese rescuers were here, liberators, were here, one of them spoke very simply and very eloquently about his decision to act. There was a point where he felt he had country here without knowing the overall objective. And this was a moral bind, I'm sure. But this man had a family, relatives, history, etc. So we saw an actual demonstration of that here. And we all find ourselves in that terrible dilemma today. Vis-a-vis what we should do in Bosnia. I have a son, Paige, and I'm agonizing about it right now. And I'm sure there are some others who share my concern, who have family members who would be what I always call cannon fodder, sarcastically. And I may have to eat my sarcastic words, and they taste very bitter in my mouth right now. And I certainly don't believe in violence, and I certainly don't want war, and I certainly don't today. But I can't help remembering that there was a time when everybody else looked the other way. And that's what nearly wiped out a culture.
I want to pick up on something that all the people agree entirely that there's something that we don't look at, and it has not been an acceptable academic subject of study, either in philosophy or psychology. There is a book, not terribly well written, but nonetheless very provocative, called People of the Lie, by a psychologist named James Scott Peck, that I would recommend to your attention if you want to get into questions of what is the nature of evil. I would put it sort of following in his footsteps in terms that Paul did. I think we can get into misapprehensions and therefore mistaken actions if we approach the thing from the point of view that there are evil people in the world and something has to be done about those evil people. Because those people, and there are large groups of people who end up committing evil after all, don't think that they're being evil when they're doing it. And who is ultimately to be the arbiter of truth in this matter? Who is evil and who is not? So when you first, it makes the whole approach to dealing with it more problematical. I think it's probably more productive to recognize that evil is a force in the world. Evil does happen, and for lack of a better definition, I'll quote to you Scott Peck's definition of it. He says that evil is that which promotes or causes destruction and death. The good, on the other hand, is that which promotes the maintenance or creation of life. And if you may come up with a better definition. It's pretty simple. It's the best that he could do, and I haven't seen a better one yet, or a more useful one. But it does goad me, at least, to thinking about how can we deal with the existence of this force that promotes death and destruction and pain and the other things that fall into that general category in the world. On the surface easy, but at a deeper level very difficult answer that I see to it is the way we prevent evil or the recurrence of it, the way we prevent genocides is by engaging ourselves actively in the service of good. What that might mean in the particular circumstances that confront us right now regarding the genocides that are happening in the world, and of course the one that's on the front page of this situation, is that we be willing to sacrifice our wealth and our comfort and our safety, perhaps, to the same degree in the preservation of peace or in the promotion of peace that we would be willing to make those sacrifices in the service of war. When we're at war, we don't question that. Our so-called leaders simply spend the money and send the troops, and the sacrifice is made, and we swallow it. We may not like it, especially we are personally touched by it. Loved ones killed in the war, like that, but one way or another, we accept it. And I don't think that we are going to prevent recurrences of this kind of thing unless we're willing to make the same kinds of sacrifices in advance of the event rather than as a reaction, too late response to the event. Elie Wiesel made an interesting proposal, apparently. I haven't seen it in detail. I just saw reference to it in one of the things that I was reading a demonstrate in my lecture last week, that civilians might start doing the same kind of thing in Bosnia that they have been doing in places like Guatemala for many years, which is putting their bodies there and putting, in a sense, putting themselves between the aggressors, the guys with the guns, and the civilians, the women and children and families and good people that make up the huge majority of the people living in those areas. I'm not sure exactly what that would entail in Bosnia, so I don't know how workable it is. I think it's an idea that needs to be explored and worked out. And of course, there are lots of other things that we can insist that our institutions, our governments, our military bodies do once we have done our homework and have come to a clear conclusion or decision in our own minds about what makes the most sense. But I do think it's important to recognize that, that the evil is definitely a force. It's not going to go away. History, in spite of Francis Fukuyama, Francis must claim that with the fall of the Soviet Union and the communist bloc, history had reached its end. Some people really believe that U.S.-style democracy and capitalism are the be-all and end-all of wisdom, and now that all that's there, because there's nothing else in the way, that we won't have any problems anymore. Well, just look at Bosnia and tell me what you think of Francis Fukuyama.
So humans are the highest form of evolution.
Well, humans may be, for the moment, the highest form of evolution, but they sure haven't solved all their problems by virtue of that eminent statement. So anyway, the important recognition is, yes, these evil forces continue to exist in the world. We can learn a lot about the ways that they manifested themselves in the past, which is sort of the initial point of this course, is to learn about what actually happened in the Holocaust, and then to read on all lectures and pay attention to all that. And then to ask, based on our knowledge of what happened in the past and what was not done, what things were tried but failed in the past, come up with the most intelligent solutions that we can to the problems that continue to face us. And it will continue to be a dilemma. As the Nicaraguans say, the struggle continues. La lucha sigue. It's not going to stop. The struggle is not going to go away. Capitalism won, or you took the course. The struggle will continue. The important thing is to get behind it in a way that promotes good.
There's one thing which I'd like to add, if I may, is the word of evil. Evil, it just depends who interprets what is good and what is evil. Obviously, what I interpret is always good and never evil, right? So, this is a very problematic word to use, particularly in social scientific circles. And that's why I think we ought to stick to humanities, which I think is more clear-cut and less polarized, perhaps less political, let's put it that way. Now, the interesting thing I wanted to add as kind of an example, an illustration in the process of my research and writing and all that, I've come across Hitler's notion of himself, and as he told other people, the inner circle, members of the inner circle. And he viewed, believe it or not, as a person who was non-violent. He said, I don't view myself as a violent person. Can you imagine? He was also a vegetarian and actually a very dogmatic vegetarian. He wouldn't drink alcohol, he just lived a very quote-unquote healthy life. And certainly, if you would ask him what he's standing for and why he does what he does, said, I am doing good. And he certainly was, there's no question about that. In my mind, after having done all the research, the interview, people who were around Hitler, that he really truly believed that he was serving good.
But there are plenty of people around him who knew. I interviewed a few people at the end of the war when I worked for the U.S. military government. And I have never interviewed fairly high officers who asserted the exact same philosophy as when before they were captured. Once they were captured, they were regretful. They changed their tune. There was no philosophic underpinning to their argument. So these were not the intermediaries of the system. Did not support the system philosophically. They were not, after all these years of propaganda, they did not support the system's philosophy as such. And furthermore, there was a major movement in the SS by which they betrayed their country. Now, these were the elite troops, okay? These were the people sworn to personal responsibility for Hitler, and they tried a separate treaty. Now, it didn't work. The deal was 10,000 trucks, free passage, and they are absolved of all crimes, etc., etc., etc. And the first step of this process involved the release of a number of prisoners as a good faith gesture. And as a matter of fact, that prisoner exchange did take place, although it resulted in a major trial after the Second World War. But if you take a look at the structure and the architecture of the system, while the head may have felt that way, the instrumentalities were fully aware. Now, Albert Speer had a change of heart in his book. It's mea culpa at the end. But he wasn't doing any mea culpas while he was engineering the entire system. And without his genius for construction, the system really wouldn't have been engineered. Now, the other thing you need to know is that in the operational, everyday aspects of the system, which depended upon the state exercising control in virtually every aspect of life. This was before computers. So now, if there's a document on everybody, and records are kept, and they're fully intimidated, an enormous amount of the effort of the state is dead broke at the moment. Mind you, this is 1934, 1935. And a tremendous amount of effort goes into controlling everything. Now, in the midst of all this, there's a tremendous amount of underhanded dealing. There's no one who's in Greater Germany, and I'm talking not about Germany proper, but the outside, who could exist during the war without the black market. Now, that's a capital offense. That undermines the state's plan. And every black market that undermines the state. But a black market undermines economic planning. The black market undermines the allocation of raw materials. It maldistributes what is essential. It means that penicillin is going to treat people who are not very sick when there are soldiers dying in the front, if it were on our side, and for their side, so black market, and particularly what went on in the country, in the fiber of the country, was the front, which looked organized, efficient, and functioning. But the deep fiber of the country could not sustain ordinary, everyday demands. It says something about people's ability to be devoted 100% to something.
But it also says something about socialism, doesn't it? Many times we overlook. It's very interesting that we always use, when we speak about Hitler's Germany, that I think you can hear me both ways. It's interesting that whenever we speak about Germany, we speak about Nazis, and we really don't speak about German National Socialists. And it's very interesting because the parallel system in the Soviet Union, which was very, very similar, I think, many times with the comparison with the Soviet socialists and the German socialists, we just simply we were solidifying it, and we talked about Hitler, or talked about something rather vague. I think what moved both systems, and he would come back to the problem of evil, I think, which lies at the heart of all of this. I mean, the evil of these systems wasn't something personal that belonged to Hitler. But the interesting thing about both systems is that they were essentially materialist. the National Socialists believe, essentially, that all social systems, all social behavior, essentially is a biological matter. It is something that oozes out of your genetic system. It is something that just simply is there. One really doesn't need to do anything about, within that system, one doesn't need to do anything really about the state or about morality, except just simply make sure that you have genetic material. That's the only function of the state ultimately, which they concentrate on. So we have at the foundation of it a biological materialism that says the essence of man is in his genes, and everything that he does, his love life, his social life, everything just simply issues forth from this genetic material, and that is the basis. We had a very similar system on the other side, where they said what determines, who we are and so forth. All of culture, all of morality. Well, yes, Lysenko is that is a strange aberration. But again, you get the notion, though, in both forms of socialism, that ultimately material relations are the essential thing. Moral behavior, how we behave towards our neighbors, how we behave with our children, is a superstructure. That is something that floats above either an economic or a biological reality. Now, of course, both were fake scientific systems. Hitler was a fake biologist as much, of course, as the Marxists were fake economists. But they both claimed in their hearts to have found a scientific system that somehow could overcome, that was supposed to overcome the system that had operated up to then, which was really basically a Judeo-Christian. And the notion of evil only makes sense within that particular system. For Hitler, there was really no evil in killing Jews, in the same way that there is no evil in a lion breaking the neck of a lamb. It is what the lion was supposed to do. The lion was programmed to do it by his genetic material. And the lion only becomes fully the lion, fully accepts being a lion in doing this particular action. And from his perspective, the concentration camps where people were murdered was essentially a hygienic method where a certain amount of genetic material was excluded so that you could have a pure nation. You see from there. So internally, there is a logic. Internally, it's not just simply people doing something nasty and evil. Internally, it's an internally logical system that has its own morality. A morality that permits to kill your neighbor if he doesn't have the right genetic material, or kill your neighbor because he doesn't belong to the right kind of social class. He belongs to the oppressor class of some sort. So then you can put him against the wall and shoot him. Both these systems are materialisms, and probably in order to understand this horror that has occurred, maybe we should also examine our senses of materialism, how we teach it at the university. In the university, we still teach to a great extent that we are essentially ethereal beings, and that we still go along with that, and we still, in many ways, look for something like the material basis for human behavior. And in that sense, we just follow straight in the line of such murderers as Hitler and Lenin. So we should see how there is a certain continuity between psychology, sociology, anthropology, the whole social sciences, and what these people in Nazi Germany and in Stalinist Russia tried to accomplish. There is a certain kind of sympathetic relationship between those two. And we both are as allergic to the Judeo-Christian system in both worlds, the same world. Now that may be provocative, but I mean that is the way, maybe that'll wake you up. Yes.
That's kind of hard to respond to, but I am on the end here, so I'll take my turn. I have real difficulty also dealing with the concept of evil within academic environment, because it's rarely brought up, and when it is, it's couched in such non-spiritual terms. In other words, we're not allowed to bring in mythology, we're not allowed to bring in ethology, we're not allowed to bring in any of the deeper psychological truths that the rest of us talk about outside of class, because those aren't considered academic. Those aren't considered objective. Those are considered subjective. These are not discourses that we commonly have. Now, we may disclose that to each other privately or whatever, but that's why we fall back on terms like humanness, because in fact it's something that we can quantify more easily. And so far, I have not been able to use the word spiritual in an academic setting adequately, even though I would like to, because in fact, my deeper psychological truths are actually on a spiritual level when I look at the universe. And then as a woman, it's very difficult for me also. I would like to point out that in fact, most of the time the faculty is male, and most of the time the class is female as a majority, so that I have some difficulty with the fact that probably at least 50% of the knowledge that's available to humanity has not been utilized yet. We are the last great natural resource, and no one's even asked us yet, for the most part, how we would handle things. So that it remains to be seen how we would handle some of these issues if we in fact had the power to do so. I don't have the answers to Bosnia, but I do know that we haven't been listened to for thousands of years, hundreds of years, for a long time, and we haven't been in the positions to make decisions. So that if we were, I think some of the terms of discourse might change, because in fact our experience of the psychological issues, the social systematic issues of the Holocaust are real different. I experienced it as a masculine event. All of the major players were men in this issue. And victims were both men and women for sure, and children, but the major players were men. So in a sense, we're looking at a masculine event in terms of history. And therefore, for us, it's a different kind of study. We can't just look at it as gender neutral. And we don't have the answers to that. But it does restructure some of the questions that need to be asked. I think there's some questions in the audience, and in fact, we should stop talking so much. Evie.
Oh, yeah, well, I was concerned that one of the things that we never talked about is how susceptible we all are to the word patriotic. Everybody wants to be patriotic, and that accounts for this. A lot of some of us are in this world where it's very difficult to be considered unpatriotic. And I think how that should come in a second discussion.
Talking about nationalism, country identity,
Patria means fatherland.
fatherland, pure.
Well, in other words, we can all be manipulated by being considered patriotic or unpatriotic.
Yeah. I just wanted to add to that. I mean, we talk a lot about evil, the evil of this man, Hitler. We talked about the force of evil. But I think we kind of missed the point, too, that I think Mr. Yauter kind of made, in that we all have the potential for that evil. And we all, we could all be sucked into that. I mean, it could be for patriotic reasons, but things that occurred during World War II weren't carried out by one big force. It was individuals making those decisions on a daily basis. And so I think that we need to really keep focusing on the fact that we all have that potential to do those evil acts, and to make sure that we're aware that sometimes when we're, another thing that I have noticed too is that when we're projecting things onto other groups, like, maybe Germans were projecting qualities that were unacceptable to themselves onto the Jewish people, it was really easy to find them and put them in concentration camps and kill them. I mean, it's a dangerous thing to objectify Germans or, Hitler or whatever, because I think that we all have those elements of us in ourselves, and we need to keep, I think, paying attention to that. If we don't, that's where I think the potential for this to occur again and again and again lives.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that if you look at what kind of genocide and biocide were planned by both sides during the last 40, 50 years, in terms of the scale that was planned for the other half of the world, we're talking about such large scale that the Germans didn't think that up, per se. I mean, it was the Russian and the American minds that thought up the next very elegant form of biocide. So we certainly can't point the finger, because there were millions and millions that died in World War II. But the plan for if the Russians or ourselves had some of our missiles go, the plan was destruction of at least 50% of the planet. which was never thought of before up until this time. And most of these things are still in place, as you know. Almost nothing has been dismantled yet. Everybody talks about it. Everybody threatens to dismantle them or not dismantle them. All of these things are still in place. And in fact, we are still producing them 3 a day in this country. Has not stopped yet. So the next possible biocide completely subsumes anything that has happened previously in humanity.
I want to make the point that we can't go around finding new scapegoats. We saw the enemy, and you know it was us. The problems are that anger still exists, envy, and all the list of quote negative emotions that we list as negative exists much today as it were. Humans, which we call jokingly the highest form of evolution. I don't care to debate that subject as a biologist at all. And that's so popular in the textbooks, not in biology textbooks, mind you. It went out of that about 25 years ago, but I've seen other textbooks that imply humans as the crowning glory of biologic evolution. It doesn't say anything about the other aspects of human evolution, of which aspects of humans evolved. But I would like to point out that every time we find an escape, somebody to put our blames on, we ought to look again. To bring you up to date, something that will affect your lives. Our governor decided that our problems in California are written by unwanted immigrants. Speaking as a first-generation immigrant, I kind of accept that. And if I spend some time of my life watching these illegals pick the fruit of California, if you've ever seen somebody pick fruit, you know what backbreaking labor is. And I didn't see a long line of applicants for those jobs. It is true that all countries, units, all physical units, have what is known as a carrying capacity. There's no doubt about it. The question is, however, whether our problems are because we've reached the carrying capacity, I don't think so, or whether we've decided to look at one tiny segment of our problem or the entire horizon. And we have to admit that we have to look at the entire horizon. And when we point the finger at them, we're beginning that very slope, which ultimately ends in what we talked about. We distance ourselves from the stranger, then they're illegal. If you're illegal, you're criminal. If you're criminal, you belong behind bars. Then you don't have rights. What do you think a concentration camp inmate is regarded? You don't have rights. Then you can be slave labor. Oh, good.
We got into a discussion about was that, that it would be a federal crime if we didn't do something about it. I think something good about the UN policy on enactment.
Conventions on
Yes, that.
prevention and punishment of terrorists.
And
Well, it wouldn't be a federal crime. It would be, the international legal status of it is touchy or debatable because the United Nations has little direct legal authority to execute its policies. But nonetheless, you're on the right track.
But how we can not that the UN has very little to do here because we don't have, the UN does not have money. Nobody has gotten together and said, I'm England and here's how many troops I'm going to send to help. And I'm the US and so nobody's like really gotten together on that. And I read this reading in the newspaper and a couple of articles. It's like, well, Clinton's still waiting for his people to decide for him. And it's like really sad. I felt like the minority there because I was really up against what they were saying.
I was going to say that I would disagree with that to a certain extent. I think that some people have made it quite clear that military action on some scale is something that sees at this point as being a desperate possibility that should be pursued. And he has made it quite clear that this is something that should be worked out. With powers here that are even closer to the problem, aware that this area, this kind of conflict has been catalyst for a lot of the compromise in the past. We go back to World War I and to a certain extent World War II, and you have a delicate relation between people with countries there. And I mean, what he conceived we've gotten, I'm not sure what it is today, these agents, people fall what I see here, it seems to have gotten here, the age don't really want to deal with that. And in terms of the UN, it's not a matter of saying, well, these are the troops that I'm going to offer. The UN absolutely is not going to do it. And if we were to go in right now, we wouldn't be the United Nations, we would be the United States doing something like that. And we have always been very wary about giving an army over to UN command. Then you're looking at where are the lines. It goes back to patriotism. Where are the lines of command? He's an American general, American troops, even though he has been superseded theoretically in authority by the UN appointed general from St. Louis, like that. The whole idea of giving that real army to foreign interest and foreign command is something that's very, very difficult, very hard to swallow, especially when you have military, which is so based on patriotism and nationalism. That's a very hard thing to do with that. Why is it very complicated to do something along these lines?
And so President Bush overcame the UN consensus in order to do Desert Storm. He pushed it through, even though we did not really have a consensual process of the countries involved. Whereas in this case, Clinton, if it is really consensual, he can't go to war in Yugoslavia, even though people were in a sense like they're overcoming that and heroic, like Desert Storm. If he's truly consensual and actually wants to be in the process, he can't really overcome the present attitude of the UN to not proceed.
Well, I don't
No, I don't think his process is at risk. I don't think he sees the United States necessarily as the human power that had to become under Bush, that we are the only power in the world, therefore we can make any decision that we want.
year when the United Nations gave the ultimatum to Serbia not to fly any more military flights over Bosnia. And then when Serbia continued to do it, the United Nations was incapable of doing anything to back up its threat. I think if military force had been, at that point, shot down a couple of planes just to say to the Serbians in clear language that no one can misunderstand, we do not accept this, we have given you our ultimatum, and now you've transgressed it, and this is the result for you, that might have then had a limiting effect on Serbia's willingness to continue to arm the Bosnians. I'm not sure if it would have worked necessarily, but it certainly is not appropriate to make a threat that you can't back up, because that's just puts fuel on the fire of the demagogues and the nationalist rhetoricians that are running the show over there. The whole United Nations question is really involved. I mean, probably a lot of you don't know an awful lot about how the United Nations was set up and what it was designed to do and what it was not designed to do. It is not a world government. It's never been intended to be one. People who oppose the United Nations, the ones that I'm aware of in the United States, and I'm sure there are plenty of other places people too, claim that what it is a big plot to impose a world government on sovereign nations. Well, that's not what its charter sets it up to do. Quite the contrary. It's set up to be a deliberative and sensual policy-making body for sovereign nations who do not give up any of their sovereignty by doing it. This is essential to the role of the United Nations, or has been thus far. And big questions are coming up now that the superpower relationship has crumbled, and we just got one superpower left, and a very uncertain world about where things are going, and people uncertain about what groups they should now identify with, which is, from my perspective, a major cause of utilities in Bosnia and the rest of Yugoslavia. People don't know anymore what to identify with now that the Yugoslavian sort of umbrella identity that they had ever since World War II is gone. Well, they're coming down to the smaller groups, and ever smaller groups that they can identify with, so that they've got some place that they feel right, and that they feel understood, and they feel at home. And unfortunately, those groups happen to be ones that indeed do have a history of conflict with each other. You know, I hope the impression last week that just because the Muslims and Croats and Serbs have been living together, marrying each other, doing business with each other for at least decades, and actually for centuries, that therefore there are no real animosities between them. There are. They're the same kinds of animosities that have fueled fights like in Europe between Protestants and Catholics, where they go back to religious differences. In my heart of hearts, I find that so ridiculous. I don't understand why different ideas about what God is, or how God works, or to what deity one pledges his or her allegiance. I don't understand how that kind of question can ever result in people feeling such hatred for each other that they will not only kill each other, but then proceed to mutilate the dead bodies of people who were their neighbors just a week ago. And this is precisely what's been happening in Bosnia. So there's a lot of stuff there that I don't understand, but
were nowhere near of as they are now. I suspect that part of the reason the Vietnam War ended is because it ruined American dinners constantly. It was in the living room in everybody's face. We could pretend it doesn't exist. Now, some of you may recall the Korean War. The Korean War had all the earmarks of the war in Vietnam. In fact, it was officially United Nations. Every newspaper, bar none, regardless of political spectrum, used to call it laughingly or very sardonically as a police act. What UN troops was police action. The UN nations that were there were us, a token British force, a token Australian force, a Turkish brigade, and I think the French must have sent an ambulance just to be known. There was nothing else. It was 90 our troops. But it wasn't broadcast to the degree that it was. Then the casualties started coming in. And then the reserves got called up. And then people started hurting. So we ended the war.
I'd like to recommend to that young lady 2 books concerning the media. One is Deborah Lipstack's book, Beyond Belief, which is an analysis of what the media here in America knew from book I did in the 30s, maybe even before. Excellent book. The other one is So It Was True by Robert Ross, a minister who did the same kind of study that Lipstack did, but of the Christian newspapers, 50 different Christian newspapers. Baptist ministers, right? 2 excellent books. The third thing, just to put this in perspective, everybody here knows what a fax machine is. I'm going to tell you what the first fax machine is, because I can remember it as a kid. This was amazing. Immediately. I saw it in the news on Saturday, in the movies, during the war. We could get photographs from Europe in 20 minutes. AP wire photos. 20 minutes. So, there's a big technological gap. So you can't think about media back then as you think about it.
At various points, it's come up that people feel the need for more regular discussion, and those of us who have been setting up the series all these years have also recognized the need for that, but haven't quite noted it. The main problem being that we haven't been provided with the money to hire the teachers to teach the sections, and some of us are looking to it out of our hides. It appears that that is changing, and the context within which it is changing is called general education. And recently there has been quite a movement among faculty curriculum setting bodies and the administration to do some new things with upper division general education. And the first thing that is that we have now gotten general education credit for the War and Peace lecture series, which is kind of the fall semester flip side of this one. And credit has now been approved for in areas A1, which is written oral analysis, and C3, which is philosophy and ethics. And we're hoping to get it accredited also in the area D5, which is in social sciences and that is current international perspectives. Anyway, to get back to the Holocaust lecture series, one of the aspects of this general education push is that the responsible academic administrators have first promised the War and Peace lecture series money, and they have held out the great likelihood that they will promise to us money also, assuming that we will make the appropriate changes to make this into a general education appropriate course. And one of the assumptions there is that we don't just hit you up with lectures and then leave you alone and hope that the faculty member has enough spare time to call extra study sessions. Sometimes that happens, usually it doesn't. Rather, if it follows the War and Peace model, what will happen starting next year, I hope we do, and I hope we agree about the wisdom of doing this, is that on Tuesday there will be a lecture, and on Thursday there will be a discussion section, so that people can get these questions out and their emotions out much more regularly and much more immediately. And the thing that makes that possible is to be instruction solutions, which of course is not a big thing. It will be a 3-unit course instead of a 2-unit course. So it'll fit the general education pattern.
So we want you to know that we have heard your concerns.
Yeah, you might want to spread that news around. You know, that's very likely to be spread.
We would like to ask you, what is it that you think that you expect them to become that another way of group or topics that we might look at?
Well, before this course, I did a research paper on the plight of the gypsies during the and I just didn't feel like it was really covered. It was mentioned many times, I think, but just wasn't covered. And I before I did this research paper, I didn't even know that there was anyone persecuted besides Jews. And so it really opened my eyes, and I was reading more.
It's a real big subject, and I have done some research on it. I major piece on it last year, and I hope to do a lecture on that next spring. And actually, my research was particularly on women, gypsies, and on the current conditions in Eastern Europe as followed through, because the gypsies are as mistreated now as they always were. So that, for instance, when some of the miners went on rampage in Eastern Europe, they opened the doors of gypsy homes and cut off the heads of gypsy size armies and miners. They had heavy equipment in their hands, and they just killed gypsies on the spot. Articles from the work of the Americans. This happened in 1990. Also, one of the many major neo-Nazi events that happened in East Germany were gypsies gypsy encampment that were attacked by neo-Nazis. So they're still considered marginal. They're still having a lot of difficulty. They're classified in multiple countries in Eastern Europe, and their plight isn't too different. It always has been associated with a lot of problems. They need to be addressed in order for them to be integrated into the societies and no longer treated viciously as they have been. So we hope to address that. I also have a major bibliography from the leading gypsy researcher in this country, who's got Real Turnauer. And she has her own research institute in Vermont, and she also teaches at the Toronto Institute of Genocide Studies. And it's possible to have her coach with a very good French accent. And I don't know if that will be one of our choices to bring her to across the country. I don't know that kind of money. But anyway, we're working on that issue. But we just didn't integrate it in this particular series. There's so many different subjects to cover.
What other things do you think that you want to cover? Perhaps.
Minutes left, so it's be nice if some other questions come so that we can. Right.
How much of the role is rationalization in non-action, for example, if you look at something that has a rational point, you can just justify anything whether it's action or not.
What do you think?
I think
until, something snaps inside, and each individual is going to have to about different issues at a different time, because something just says to us, this is wrong, this cannot continue, and I've got to get involved. How do you make that happen? How do you get people to get past the rationalization?
Well, critical thinking is one thing which we were a terrific lecture in. So I think that's a very important thing. I think it was one of the key lectures by Richard. And then self-justification or reduction of cognitive dissonance, that's what we are calling, is always something which comes up when we are to do something which will be unpleasant which in a sense. And if we are told to do that, until the time we no longer can avoid it. And then, and that's very important, and it has been said tonight, because then, if we no longer can avoid it, it may be too late. Because then we are in a prison, and we are in a totalitarian society, and then our life is at risk if we deviate from the norms set by those who are in power.
We always have to come to the extent where, to the point where we're so overwhelmed by it that we have no other choice but to do something. Can't we just do things before it gets to such an extreme?
Plenty of people do. And in any culture all around the world, you'll find some people working around the social problems of their culture way ahead of other people and sacrificing in order to do that. And something has not been emphasized in this class. Well, we talk so much about how hard it is to get people to work, how difficult it is to get stuff to respond, and yes, all that is very, very hard, very heartbreaking in some ways, but we haven't had a chance to really say how satisfying it is to do work, to believe in work, you know you're helping people, and there's nothing more exciting than working with a group of people that are also doing the same work. And I would like to encourage each of you to find groups of people that you feel simpatico with, that you can do work on social issues with. There's nothing like it. It gets you past all the depression, it gets you past the apathy, and you get energy from other people who are doing the same work and want the same kind of doing.
It doesn't quite do our soldier, you have to go to class here and you get shot up.
Well, we have a voluntary army at this point, and we had they made a big point out of making it voluntary instead of conscription.
In spite of that, you do have to, we have this course, this is a moral battle, and it would be unfair for you to walk out of this course having settled with that. You have to carry this in your heart.
If you want to join some of the armed forces, I think that may be a very interesting idea to solve some of those problems. If you think that's the road to do it, that would be very interesting.
I want to remind you of the history of the Lincoln Brigade. They're very much honored today. You know that? The Lincoln Brigade was shunned in America.
50% has been died, or something like this.
The Lincoln Brigade were American volunteers who procured ideas in the region, enlisted in Franco in Spain. And they were people from all walks of life, and they were absolutely naive. They had no training. They were cannon fodder. Many of them were killed because they weren't trained. Those who survived eventually learned enough. But nowadays, they're in their late 60s and 70s, and they're very much honored because they were the first Americans to volunteer against tyranny.
There was one of them sitting right back up there earlier, and it looks like he's gone. He's finding Bailey.
Let me say one thing before I just slip it in here. This action stuff about joining groups and, doing social action is all very fine. But it can't be just simply deciding for other people to go to war. I think if you really think that this is the way to go, then you want to, I think that you're morally, in some sense, you ought to think about joining yourself.
You think I was suggesting that?
I don't know.
Social action. I was thinking of Rich probably is down to Operation, whatever it's called, to collect blankets and so forth in Fresno for the Bosnians. That's what I was thinking. I was thinking of humanitarian efforts. I was not considering, not necessarily enjoying the government.
No, it's being suggested.
I was suggesting that.
At that time, there were two more hands that I saw. Just about out of time. I think your hand was up first.
You asked for suggestions on the things to add to the course next year, and one suggestion that I civilians too, though. I mean, the civilians were just as guilty, I mean, of not doing anything. I think that would be interesting to me.
Or take the huge number of people in the town of Auschwitz who got home because the Howard percentage of Jewish people were brought out of the home, the houses, and know that they were living someone's home.
I think just they're living next door to this person.
A lot of people.
We seem to be unable to avoid the idea of armed conflict to accomplish the no, somebody else goes. Do you all see any way around that? How do you feel about armed conflict?
Prevention, if we had dealt with Bosnia in 88, 89, and 90, we would not be in the position that we're in 92, where we have to have actual surgical procedures, but we could have anticipated.
I would like to take serious issue with the term "we." Very serious issue. When I came to the United States in 1945, somebody told me that we lost China. And I said, I didn't know you hadn't. The presumptuous arrogance that we control other people as if they were in our pocket is a notion that we have to stop, and we ought to stop teaching it, and our words do have meaning. The "we" term is a very nice term when used appropriately, but it isn't "we." It isn't "we." The point is that we cannot do what we have to decide is "who," and we have to deal with the "I" and "thou" issues. It isn't "we," it is "I" and "thou."
But I think that the deeper issue that this all brings up, and it's back again on television and on the radio, the real issue that brings up all of us is the incoherence of our moral system. I mean, that is where we have difficulty with it. If one say, we talk one way, then suddenly we are confused. It's just really, it is kind of a summons for us to think morally more coherently in some way.
Well, I think there's one thing which we can look at, for example, the situation in Panama, or what we did in Nicaragua, or in the other places. If someone wouldn't do it to us, we would find better. And yet when we do it, it's okay. If someone else does it, it is undemocratic. And I think that's precisely something which we said earlier in terms of, good. What I say is good, what you say is bad. And that's exactly where the critical thinking is, because we all are biased in favor of what we accept as right, which doesn't make it right. But because we have got into it, we've been socialized ideologically to accept something which we have never questioned enough. We will say that that's what I'm familiar with, that's what I've been exposed to, that's what I believe, quote unquote believe, and therefore it is good. And what you believe, which is different from what I do, is bad. And that produces conflict, which can escalate into genocide, which can escalate into Holocaust. And if we don't recognize that, I think we are in trouble, and that's precisely one of the things which we hope we could have learned here throughout the semester.
Can I say one more thing about this question? You were asking, to the question of whether military force is the way, sort of last recourse. Maybe always. Yeah, I like the distinction that Dr. Steiner made earlier in the semester between aggressive military action and limiting military action. Containment. I see, I am 100% against using our military force to aggrandize what our leaders call our national interests. I think that is immoral in anything that I am, on the other hand, I said earlier, I'm not a pacifist. I am 100% in favor if it can be, one has done his homework and knows that military containment use of force is applicable or is appropriate in a particular limited circumstance. I'm for it. I see it in somewhat simplistic terms. Parents, when they're bringing up children, parents, when they know they've got the moral authority over somebody else, sometimes have to use containing force in order to keep their children from doing something wrong. And frankly, I see the world's position vis-a-vis the Serbs in somewhat the same terms right now. I think the Serbs are caught up in doing something which, in the eyes of the rest of the world, not just the Serbs, mind, I mean, like I said last week, Croatia and Muslims are involved too, but the Serbs in particular are doing stuff that is not acceptable, and they have to. So, that's my answer.
That sounds
That's not
yeah, it was kind of
Do you know how far you've gotten along with the tapes in the library?
Yeah, this week and last week I'm not in there. I should
Oh,
be
but
in
you
a
have the
couple days.
ones, I just missed back, this Sister Ritter. She's in, it
She might be in.
was quite a while ago. I
Yeah.
went there once, it wasn't there, so I just didn't know when to go again.
I'm gonna go in and check them all next week. Is there like tests? I was under the assumption there was just papers and stuff.
Oh, I don't know.
something that we never even thought of, something entirely different. Yeah. But he had this thing about treating. Have you stopped reading? It just is not on our television. Doing something. Thank you. It's nice.
concentrating on so many different